So I'm really excited today because this is the first time that I'll be able to work on my own project vehicles. I mean, pretty much since like early February. I've been building customer stuff since then. And while I love doing customer jobs, I certainly love the extra income that it brings in. You got to take some time to work on your own stuff. So today I'm going to take care of something on the OBS Suburban that has bugged me, not only since I've owned the Suburban, but on pretty much every 2500 OBS series truck that I've seen on the road, pretty much since I was a kid. I can legitimately remember being on the school bus. We were going, I don't remember where, I think it was a field trip, and I remember looking out the window and there was an old body style Chevy, you know, a GMT 400 sitting on the side of the road in a parking spot. And I remember looking at it and thinking, man, that is the worst design decision that GM could have made. And today, we're gonna fix it. So my name's LT. On this channel, we build custom high performance and off-road trucks. And if that content appeals to you, help me out and hit that subscribe button because we're trying to reach 100,000 subs by the end of this year. So let's jump right in with the OBS. So if you're a longtime subscriber to the channel, you'll recognize this. It's a 99 Suburban, and I really haven't got a chance to do a whole lot on it lately. I picked it up back in October, and I've done a few odds and ends to it. Quick overview, it's got a Vortec 454 up front, 4L80 transmission. I did swap in an NP241 floor shift transfer case because the 246 auto track was kind of on its way out. It's got a 14-bolt full floater out back. So, I mean, overall, this is a pretty strong powertrain in a 3/4 ton Suburban. And these GMT 400 trucks have always been my absolute very favorite body style of anything from GM, even to this day. So I love how they look for the most part. But on the 2500s, there is one thing that I just absolutely cannot stand. And that's back here. It has to do with the track width or the stance. Now, when I was a kid on that field trip, I remember looking out the window, and this is kind of what I saw from the back. You know, you got the rear wheels that are sucked way in below or behind the surface of the fender, however you want to say that. And the front wheels, they more or less sit flush. And the half tons, I think they do that a little bit, but they visually look a lot closer. Now, I've got a level here, and this will kind of give you a good representation of what it is. If you go from the top edge of the fender flare right there, I'm touching the tire at that spot there. We are, if I can get it up other way. So that's roughly level, and I measured it earlier. There's about 3/16 of a gap from this edge right here to the level. So we'll call that flush just kind of for conversation's sake, but then let's take a comparison out back because it is a huge, huge difference. So I'll hold the level in the same spot up there, just kind of touching the side of the fender flare. I'll see if I can kind of hold it level. On the tape measure, there's 3.5 inches between the edge of that same spot on the tread to the edge of the level. So basically, on paper, it looks like the rear is 7 inches narrower, which is actually not. The rear end, I measured the track width and the wheel mounting surface differences between the two. The rear end is only about 3 inches narrower than the front is, but because the rear body of the Suburban is wider, it kind of throws off that visual comparison even further. Now, I actually did buy a set of wheel spacers from Amazon. I tried to put them on here, but something didn't line up in the bolt, or not the bolt pattern, but it had to do with the hub wouldn't go through the spacer. And I really hate the idea of wheel spacers anyway, but I still can't stand how this rear end looks and how much narrower it is than the front. So I've got a solution. So I'm sure I'm going to title this video something intentionally a little bit misleading, like I'm solid axle swapping my Suburban, which I guess technically I am. Although it's not the solid axle swap that you're probably hoping for, but in the future, perhaps that still will happen. But that's a long ways off right now. I just want to take care of this, and there's about a million other things that need to happen before we get to the front end of the Suburban, but maybe, that's all I'm saying. So anyhow, yes, I'm changing the rear axle, and that seems like a pretty drastic move at first when you think all I'm really trying to accomplish is have the rear wheels stick out a little bit further to match the fronts. But there's actually a little bit of logic behind my decision to change out the rear axle, and it's more than just making it a little bit wider, although that is kind of what started me down this road. First of all, yeah, I want it to be wider, but second of all, I've got a 14-bolt full floater. That's a good thing, but it has an open differential and it has drum brakes, and those are two things that kind of go against putting any more money into this axle for me. And yeah, I know I could invest a little bit more and put a limited slip in there, and I could put a disc brake conversion on there, but those all cost money, and I still wouldn't address the problem of a wider axle, and I'd still have to buy some wheel spacers if I wanted to use this existing axle. So, and then there's the argument of like why they did it in the first place, why they have a narrow track width. you know, people have commented, because I made a few hints about what I'm doing, and people have commented like, well, number one, they do it for handling, maybe, but you know, my 2020 AT4 has the same exact track width, both front and rear. Some people say they do it for traction, but again, there's the same argument. And other people finally say it has to do with the turning circle. A narrower rear axle might make the truck, you know, turn around in parking lots a little bit better. And those all may be true. I'm not saying that it's not. All I'm pointing out is that, look, a lot of vehicles come from the factory with the same exact track width, front and rear. So for all those reasons, I'm just saying, look, we're going to go with a different axle, and I'm going to gain a lot of benefits more than just a wider stance. So let me show you what I picked. Boom, this guy right here. And before we get into why it's all torn apart, because this is a complete junkyard axle, first let me tell you what it is and why I chose it. So this particular axle is a Dana 70 Super, and this would have been found underneath 2003 to 2005 Chevy Express 3500 single wheel vans. Now, probably the first question is, well, why are you going with a Dana instead of like the AAM 11.5 or even a 14 bolt from a little bit newer model truck? Because those axles both are a little bit wider, and you would be correct. For the GMT 800 trucks, they came with two different options. For the 2500 HDs, they had the AAM 11.5, which is found in the 8.1s or the Duramaxes, or if you had a 6-liter 2500 HD, those came with a 14-bolt full floater, which is like we have here. And the 14-bolt full floaters and the AAM 11.5 were both a little bit wider. The track width, or the hub-to-hub or WMS, wheel mounting surface measurement of the 14-bolt under the Suburban, not this one. The Suburban is 65 inches from hub to hub, where the GMT 800 trucks is like 67 inches. Now, that's 2 inches wider, but it's still not wide enough to accomplish what I want. And although the good thing about those 14 bolts is they did come with disc brakes. So I could have got a limited slip disc brake, 14 bolt full floater, or an AAM, American Axle Manufacturing 11.5, but still wouldn't be wide enough, because if you look at those 2500 HD trucks in the 2001 to 2010 range, the back axle is still narrower than the front. So not wide enough, we needed to look a little bit wider. Now, I knew for a while that van 14 bolts were about 70 inches wide, and that was kind of the target I was going for, somewhere between 69 and 70 inches wide. And I could have grabbed a van 14 bolt from a same year truck, but again, it would not have had the disc brakes like this axle does here. So there's a lot of different options, and I could go on forever kind of on my logic of why I chose this particular axle. But let me tell you, this is probably the rarest thing that I have had to buy in a very long time. So in the 03 to 05 Chevy Expresses, they had two different axles depending on which version you got, the 2500 or the 3500. The 2500s had a Dana 60 Super, which is actually a semi-floating axle, which I didn't really want to go from a full floater to a semi-floater, and I have no idea why they made the Dana 60 in the Express vans as a semi-floater, because I mean, in the Dodge trucks, they had a Dana 60 for a while, and that was a full floater. But anyway, that's, again, a whole nother story. So the reason this particular axle was so hard to find was the combination of the 410 gear, because that's what my Suburban has in it now. I wanted to match it, and the limited slip. Pretty much every Dana 60 out there was a 373. Some of them were 373 limited slips. I found a handful of 410 open differentials, but to find one that was 410 limited slip, Dana 70 Super, full floater, disc brake axle from a 2003 to 2005 Express, you wouldn't believe how hard it was to find. I actually had to buy this particular axle here all the way from New York, and that kind of explains a little bit of what I'm doing right now. You can kind of see this is a really, really rusty axle, and the yard that I bought it from claims that the vehicle only had 50,000 miles, and it very well could have, but you know, if the thing were used all winter, that would definitely explain a lot of the rust and stuff that you'll see like on the backing plates. And then of course in transit, I'm sure these got damaged, because like I said, this thing came from upstate New York somewhere. So the question that you might be wondering is, why do I have it torn apart? Well, that's a great question. I really shouldn't have to, but just kind of out of curiosity, I popped the cover because I wanted to see what was going on the inside. First, to make sure that it was indeed a 410 limited slip like they claimed it was, which it actually is a 410 limited slip disc brake axle. So we're all good there, but there was a fair amount of rust on the inside of this differential, and I don't know if maybe the vehicle was in the flood, somehow some water got inside the differential. It was all drained when it came to me. But on like the upper half of the ring gear, there was a fair amount of surface rust, and it was to the point where I wanted to clean it up before I put it back together. So that's what I've been doing for the last hour or two. I completely tore this axle apart, pulled the carrier out. I probably should put some new bearings on it, but I just kind of am gonna, you know, send it, as they say, just till I get this thing under the truck and put some miles on it, because I don't really use the Suburban a whole lot. But anyhow, pulled it apart, cleaned everything up. I took a little bit of Scotch-Brite to the gears. The main thing I was concerned about, let me see if I can flip this over, is that there would be serious pitting on the ring and pinion gear, and there's really not. I mean, you can kind of see some of the surface rust left down there, but the ring and pinion, most of them look pretty good. There was just some minor surface rust, and the same thing on the bearings. I'd say, based on looking at them, they look like they have a little more than 50,000 miles of wear, but anyhow, no major pitting on either the ring gear or the pinion gear in there. So I was happy to see that. But like I said, I just cleaned all the surface rust up. I have left the axles out, or I'm gonna leave the axles out because I need to pull the hubs off because I have new brake shoes, backing plates, and all that good stuff. Those are parking brake shoes, by the way. So anyway, there's a lot of information here, but yeah, this is what I chose. Dana 70 Super 2003 to 2005 Chevy Express. And the magic number for the width, 70.5 inches by the time you put the brake rotors on there. So we are in total 5 inches wider than the 14 bolt that's in the Suburban now. It's definitely not going to bring the tires all the way out to the edge of the fender, but those 5 inches wider are definitely going to improve the stance and how it looks so much. And then I've got a limited slip and a disc brake conversion all at the same time. And I'll go into the disc brake conversion in a future video because I will have to change a master cylinder and some things like that. But I have no idea how much time I have left on this video. My process from here, or my steps are, I'm going to put the differential back together, put the carrier in, set the backlash, put a little bit of oil in it, and then I need to cut the spring perches and the shock mounts off, because to physically mount this under my Suburban, those both need to be in different locations. Couple hours worth of work later, one change of clothes, and we got the axle pretty much ready to slide underneath the Suburban just to kind of do a test fit and make sure the pinion angle is in the right direction. As far as the spring pads go, these are, I believe, from Rough Stuff Specialties. I'll put a link down in the description below. You'll notice they're only tack welded on for now. I made sure that they are centered. I took some measurements from the wheel mount surface out here to the center, and then of course I measured center to center from there to there at 47 inches, which is what the spring perch width is on my truck. So everything should be exactly where it needs to go. Now I did tack weld these on just by matching the angle that the stock van perches were at, and that kind of is what dictates the pinion angle, or where the pinion is pointed up or down. Now I just kind of ballparked it and took some rough rudimentary measurements on the 14 bolt in the Suburban, and I think that we're gonna be in the ballpark. And like I said, we just did use the stock van angle, so if it's not correct, all I've got to do is just trim those tack welds and then make a slight adjustment. So keep that in mind if you're going to be putting a donor axle into a new vehicle. Don't fully weld in the spring perches until you've double checked the pinion angle. I'm going to go over a couple of more differences between this Dana 70 Super and the 14 bolt full floater that's in the Suburban, just because it'll probably come up in the comments, and after I watched the clip I did earlier, I realized I didn't cover everything I wanted to. Just in terms of overall strength, one axle to the other, they should be very close to each other. Now, the 14 bolt may get a ever so slight nod in total strength, mainly because of the extra pinion support bearing that it has that the Dana 70 does not have. Other than that, they're both full floating axles. I didn't do a spline count or anything like that. Also, ring gear diameter, they both have the same 10.5-inch ring gear. The AAM 11.5 that was in the 8.1 and Duramax 2500 HDs, that's definitely a little bit stronger axle, but probably overkill for my application, and once again, not the correct width. So I think that's kind of all the differences between the two. Once again, this is a Dana 70 Super 410 gear limited slip full floating rear differential with disc brakes. In the next episode, or one of the next episodes, I'm going to go over swapping out all this stuff because I have new backing plates, new parking brake shoes, rotors, caliper mounts, calipers. So I have all new braking system. The one difference I will mention right now, on the van, the little flex lines actually went right from the caliper and they went up to the frame, where on the trucks they had a little flex line that went down to the axle, then a hard line that went over to a single flex line that split up to the frame. And that's what I'm going to do on this one. So I also picked up some little brake line mount tabs that I'll spot weld somewhere right in here. Once again, I'll show you that all in the next upload, but this is the solid axle swap we're doing on the Suburban, and I am really happy and anxious to get this thing underneath and see how much better it's going to look with the correct, in my opinion, wheel spacing. And once again, we could have thrown a bunch of money into the 14 bolt to try to make it do what this is going to do, but still would have relied on using wheel spacers. It might come up in the comments down below. As far as cost for this thing goes, it took me $1,100 to get this shipped to my door, which is a lot when you think about the cost of an axle. But like I said, it was one of the only, if not the only, Dana 70 Super 410 limited slip full floater van axles that I could find in the whole freaking country. And funny story, I actually ordered another one from, what was it, that big junkyard, that LKQ. I did order one from LKQ, and I put this in a way earlier video, and they actually mistakenly sent me a Dana 60 Super, which was the semi-floating axle. It was a 410 limited slip, and it was a lot less rustier than this one, but it wasn't the right axle, so we had to send that back, and luckily this is the one that we found. So like I said, apparently this is a really rare axle. They didn't make that many of them in this exact configuration. Next time, we're going to get a little bit closer to getting this underneath the truck. So I got to say thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate each and every one of you. Please click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got to get to 100,000 subs by the end of this year. Also visit TolmanPerformance.com if you wanted to help support the channel even further than that. Pick up some merch. We got some cool t-shirts, a couple cool designs. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you next time.